Can't hear the sound.
Turn it up.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm 1 inch. My name is Michael Janowski. I'm district chair for District 1. That's where we are. I'd like to talk a little bit about just our district. District 1 is the largest district in the state. We have the largest representation in the state, even though we have a small population. And that's a result of, we have 9 precincts, and each precinct has at least 2 delegates for representation. So we start out with 18. Last at state convention, we had 34 delegates. We had more power than any other district. The closest one to us was 24 delegates. So we're politically active. We've had full delegations at the county and the state convention. I really feel that District 1 is, waking up and becoming politically active. Something else I've noticed is through all the forums that I've been to, that I'm really proud that District 1 is truly environmentally conscious. And some of the questions that are going to come tonight, and I hope from the floor also, is going to reflect that. We have an incredible area here, and we are its stewards, and these are our representatives to help guide us and guide our district through what we're all going to face, whether it's infrastructure, healthcare, whatever. So what I'd like to do is explain the way this is laid out. We have several questions that we've solicited literally from people. I sent out emails to everyone that receives an email in District 1, and Barbara sent it out to Honoka Business Association, and Mezu did it for Hamakua Resistance. So we received all these, and we put together about 10 to 13 questions. What we really want is we want your questions. We want to use our questions as fill-ins. So we want your participation here. So we don't want to be up here and talk to you. We want you to come to our candidates here and bring up what you want. So what's going to happen is we have 2 runners here, and there's one and there's the other. And just grab them, and they have pencils or paper and pens. Write down a question. They're going to bring it up to us, and we're just going to go through them. We're not going to change them at all. We're just going to make sure there's no duplicates and whatnot. So what we really want is the body of this and tonight to come from you. And we have our questions, but we want your questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan, and I sure hope you enjoy it. Oh, I'm sorry. I have some thank yous I'd like to point out. I have over here, I get Mezu Louie and Barbara Franklin. We have Ton, who owns the Honoka People's Theater. We have Francine Roby. I don't know where she is, but she is absolutely the field general here. And we have Dave Anderson, did security. His wife Sarah is right here behind me doing photography. And of course, Hattie and Emma. So with that, in an informal sense, here we are, and please enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. So my name is Susan Maddox, and I'm going to be the moderator this evening. Just a couple of pretty important reminders, actually. If you would all please take a moment and silence your cell phone, if not, turn it off completely. And if you find you receive a call that you really must take, would you be kind enough to quietly step outside and take it outside? We're going to start this evening with some introductions. Each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to share whatever it is they would like to share in an opening statement, but we hope it would include what inspired them to become politically active and community activists, and also what they feel they'll bring to the office that they seek. And once we've done that, then we'll move into the round of questions, the ones that Michael talked to you about that came in advance. Those also will be basically 2-minute questions. Our timer is Ida. She's right here in the front. She has some cards, and we'll ask that you respect those. So at 1 minute, she'll give you a 1 minute, and at 10 seconds. And then the final one, which is stop. Mid-syllable if necessary, so that we can get through all of the questions for this evening. And I really appreciate your time for coming. For those of you who may not know, this evening we are actually talking with candidates, listening to candidates for the State Senate District 4. That's Lorraine Inoue, the current incumbent, and Heather Kimble, her opponent, her challenger. And the State House of Representatives District 1, Representative Mark Nakashima and Kuhan Pak Mander. All right, I got that right. Thank you. Okay, so if we would like to start, please, with our opening statements. And Senator Inoue, 2 minutes.
Testing. How's this? Thank you for tonight's forum, and to everyone attending as well. At heart, I'm a farmer who grew up in the plantation village of Wainaku. We're taking care of each other and our little village gardens where you survived. So I'm humbled to have served as your state senator, mayor, and council member. I'm humbled because I view these elected positions as doing the people's work, listening to your needs, concerns, and dreams, and finding solutions. I'm very proud to have successfully brought home more than $420 million over the past 4 years for projects that residents of this district asked for. I also secured $135,000 for Hamakua Youth Foundation and $88,000 for the Waipio Valley Cattle Farms, plus programs to train new farmers. Every dollar secured represents a ton of work. You need at least 14 votes in the Senate to move anything. So you must have relationships with colleagues to successfully bring home more than $100 million every year. These funds will touch many, many lives, but there are several lesser-known things I'm also proud of. Saving a bill to reduce foster care social worker caseloads. A bill now signed into law to enable homebound kupuna and the disabled to secure necessary ID to care for themselves and their loved ones. We call it Dieta's Law because it was inspired by a homebound kupuna right here in Hamakua. The first in the country to establish a renewable energy resources for utilities by 2045. That's big. These are just few of the things I've been working on, sometimes small steps, sometimes giant progressive ones. I'm pleased with the progress we've made, yet know there's still much more to be done. Mahalo, we look forward to the questions.
Thank you. Ms. Kimble.
Aloha.
Aloha.
My name is Heather Kimble, and I'm candidate for State Senate District 4. I wanted to thank our hosts tonight and all of you for taking time out of your evenings to be here. When I decided to run for office, I sat down with a good friend of mine, somebody who'd been involved with state politics for a long time. And I asked him, I said, what does it take to be a good legislator? And he gave me 2 pieces of advice. He said, don't be a jerk, and always remember why you decided to run. The first one, for those of you who know me here, they can vouch that I'm a pretty nice person. But for the second one, let me tell you why I'm running for office. I'm running for my kids, for my family, for my friends and neighbors, for my colleagues, for my paddling family, for all the folks that I've met canvassing door to door. Being part of this community, being fortunate enough to call Hawaii home, it has made me a better person, and it's allowed me to accomplish things that I never thought possible. And so the reason I'm running is out of a deep sense of gratitude. I want to give back because I appreciate that the values of this community are unique. I want to do all that I can to protect that which makes Hawaii so special. I stepped up because I appreciate the transformative power of Hawaii, and I want to work to build a brighter future here, so that we can be an example of progressive values making life better for all people. I believe in the potential of Hawaii to lead the country in developing strategies that create greater social and economic justice and build stronger and more resilient communities. As your state senator, I will always remember why I ran. On August 11th in the primary, the power for transformation rests with you, the voters. I ask you to cast your vote for me, Heather Kimble, and join me in building a brighter future for Hawaii. Aloha.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima.
Aloha. For myself, my journey has been one of service. I've always wanted to be involved, and I've always wanted to do things for others. In college, I took an internship with U.S. Senators Mark Matsunaga, and I had 3 months in Washington, D.C. The 3 months turned into a 2-year appointment. And during that time, I was able to work on a number of bills and projects that were important to the people of Hawaii. Upon returning, I took a couple of positions at the legislature during the session and did the same type of work on the local level. A friend once commented to me, "Oh, must be kind of a letdown, yeah, to go from Washington, D.C. To the local level." And I said, well, in D.C., you're working on H3 and projects like that, and over here, maybe it's Mrs. Yamamoto's road. But ultimately, those things are important to the people that need to have those projects done. And I think that was kind of key as to why it is I myself sought elected office for myself, to be able to more effectively help the people of Hamakua. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kakmando.
Thank you. Thank you. Is that okay? Or stand back here? Hi, I decided to run a mere 6 weeks ago because frankly I'm heartbroken at the direction that I see our county, our district going in. I know we all love Hamakua and we all love Honoka. And thank you, Tan and Phaeton, for giving us this wonderful palace for community in this event and all the organizers. But to be quite honest, I've been quite disappointed with the direction. Mark knows I'm very upset about what's going on with the dairy in O'Okala. I came to one of his public meetings to talk about the people who had been going into the hospital in emergency for fecal bacterial contamination, ailments. The gulches are dead zones. The dairy continues to release millions of gallons of wastewater, of cow manure into our waterways. I was very upset. I'm upset by the Honua energy facility in Pepekeo that's proposing to draw 21 million gallons of water from the Hakala aquifer every single day, mix it with 24 chemicals, re-inject it back into the aquifer and have it filter out into the coastal waters. This kind of contamination of water supply is considered terrorism by the United Nations, and here we have our elected officials supporting it. I feel that something drastic needs to be done to change the direction we're going in for our agricultural community. When Mark voted to give our hotel tax to pay for the Honolulu rail, I found that to be a terrible betrayal of the community in which he was born and raised. I love Hamakua, I love Honoka. I want the voices of us and who care about the Aina and our resources to be heard at the legislature, not those of corporate interests. I do not
Thank you, Ms. Pack.
And I don't take corporate money. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Next up, we're going to move into the questions that Michael talked to you about, the ones that people had a chance to submit in advance. Most of the response times are 2 minutes. There's one toward the end. You can just be thinking about this now. It's one word. You get one word, okay? So, and we will hold you to that one word. Everybody will be asked the same questions. If people have specific questions for any of the candidates, we would ask. Those we will not ask in the panel format. You are welcome to talk with them afterwards or collect an email or a phone number and address those. But this evening we want you to hear what all 4 candidates feel about the same questions and issues. What we're going to start in alphabetical order by last name, and we will rotate with each question so that each candidate will be first to answer a question as we move along. The first 2 questions are general, 2 minutes each. Then we'll move into some issue questions, and then we will catch the ones from the audience. So the first question, and we will start with Senator Inoue, and then come right straight down the table. What is your best method of problem solving? And then please share an example of something that did not go as you planned, and what did you do to handle that?
One more, can you
Yes.
respond again?
What is your best method for problem solving? And then share an example of something that did not go as planned, and how did you handle that situation?
Thank you. I said earlier that there was a bill that I introduced talking about an issue that was called into my office by a kupuna in Hamakua. The reason of the phone call was that Dieta had issues with regards to getting her ID, the renewable of her ID. The law says that in order for you to renew your ID, that a doctor needs to sign the form if you're unable to do so. Dieta was homebound. She was afflicted with an illness that prevented her from getting to the state building. During the course of the phone call, I did not know Dieta, and hearing her case, her husband was in hospice. Her doctor sent her a note that he has closed his business and will not be able to help her. So the cry to my office was received. We searched as many people, talked to many people, how we can help her. Finally, I told my staff, call the Bay Clinic. Talked to the Bay Clinic, they sent a doctor to her home, and the doctor signed the form. Let me tell you what happened. Now, in order for her to get her state ID, she wouldn't have been able to sign the papers had her husband, who was in hospice, pass on. And so what we did was, because we still had time to draft a bill, I created a bill to take the word doctor out of the statute and replaced it with a certified caregiver. But it was a challenge, because the attorneys that helped me draft the bill says, we've never seen something like that, but let's give it a chance. Thank my colleagues for helping me to pass this measure, and the first time you never get to pass a bill, and it's now law.
Thank you, Senator.
Oh,
No, moving on. So, Ms. Kimble, what is your best method of problem solving? And then share an example of something that didn't go as planned.
In one of my previous careers, I worked for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and my position there was leading the bioinformatics group. This is the computational group that would track all of the samples through our system. That we were working on the International Human Genome Project effort. And when I took over that group, they had tried for about 5 years to develop a system to track all of the samples through the process and hadn't been able to get it done. And so they asked me to come in and do it, and I'll tell you what makes the difference. It's taking the time to diagnose. When you have a problem situation, it's pretty obvious to see what the outcomes of the problem is, but it's difficult often to see what the direct cause of that issue is. And so as a scientist, as somebody that's been in administration, in a leadership role, when I'm problem solving, my primary focus is spending the time talking to the individuals that are involved to really determine what is the nature of the problem and how best to go about solving it. As far as something going unexpectedly, Things go unexpectedly all the time. In fact, I think if you are overly optimistic that everything's going to go the way you exactly, set it to, you're in for disappointment. And that's one of the reasons that I'm really focused on building resilience in our community, because there are so many things out there right now that are uncertain, and we need to prepare for those as best as possible. For example, our economy is heavily dependent on tourism and real estate development, two sectors that are highly influenced by outside forces, outside of our community. In order to build community resilience, we need to expand and diversify our economy. Similarly with climate change, we do know that it's happening, we do know that it's human-caused, but the direct impacts are still uncertain. And again, preparing our infrastructure and our community for those impacts is critically important.
Thank you. And one more request, please. I know everyone is passionate about your particular candidate, but we would appreciate it if you would hold your applause so that we can move through the questions in the rest of the evening. So thank you. Representative Nakashima, your best problem-solving method and an example of something that didn't go as planned.
I think for myself, one of my problem-solving methods is to bring together the people who are part of the issue or have interest in the particular issue, and getting all of them at the table to discuss it together. I think that often yields the best results. In terms of disappointment, I think in the legislative process there are many twists and turns that occur, and just this past year, one of the big bills that I had been supporting was a job training bill in order to allow better training and accountability of employees throughout the state. And I felt that throughout the entire state, there is not an accountability, and that needed to be put in place. So I put a bill together that would have created an ongoing program of training, and unfortunately at the very end, that bill did not pass the conference. And I think going forward, I will go back and circle back with my colleagues who were participating in the discussion on that conference to identify what the issues and concerns were to them, and to try and come back with a better bill this coming year that addresses their issues.
Thank you. Ms. Pack-Mander.
Okay. Many people in the room first heard of me when I was dealing with the Kukui-Haile Park controversy. And I live, to be very brief, what it was if you don't know, I live in Kukui-Haile, and it was proposed that first it was a $2.5 million baseball park, and then it went up to $5 million, and now it's no longer a baseball park, but But the problem was, how can I be discreet? When you're an outsider and you come to a neighborhood, and this was 6 years ago, a neighborhood that is as venerable and historic as Kukui-Haile, one of the oldest villages in Hawaii that far predates the United States. There are difficulties coming in, and I believe that we brought it all together. We formed the Kukui-Haile Neighborhood Association. I became secretary, but it was very much an equitable kind of leadership and decision-making. And we brought to the table park planners, our county councilwoman, people in Waipio Valley, people who were from there for generations, as well as the newcomers. And as a result, I am proud to say our neighborhood, which was once fractured ethnically on racial lines as well as on lines of how long you had lived there, is now tight and we can work together. I never thought when I began that controversy I would ever be buddies with Valerie Poindexter, who was pushing for the development. but now we confide in each other, and I think it's really bonded and cemented my attachment to Honoka, to Hamakua, and to my community. She's taught me a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, and we'll start with Ms. Kimble. What is the most pressing problem facing our district, and what would you do at the state level to address it?
It's a good idea to maybe describe the extent of District 4 at this point. It starts at Honolulu Bridge outside of Hilo, comes all the way up here along the Hamakua coast to Honoka. It's Waimea, Hawaii, Kauai, Waikoloa, all the way down to the Kona Palisades. And as you can imagine, it's quite a diverse district, and the needs are quite diverse. You know, anything from affordable housing, homelessness, access to health care, theft, drugs, child welfare services. There are many, many things that need to get done. To boil it down to a single issue, I would have to say that it comes down to economics. And again, as I said just a moment ago, you know, making sure that we have more economic diversity is a key part of our sustainability and our resiliency to outside forces. But another issue is economic fairness in our community. Because of our GE tax system, which is a regressive tax system, we tax our lower and moderate income families at a much higher rate than we tax the top 2%. So one of the first things that I will be working on, if elected, is really making our tax system more fair and ensuring that we keep more funds in the pockets of our working families. And that starts with looking at making the earned income tax credit a true credit, increasing renters credit, which has not been adjusted in 30 years, and looking at increasing the food credit as well. So building on our economy, making sure we have greater diversity is a key issue, and then making sure that our systems of taxation are more fair.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima, the most pressing problem, and how would you address it at the state level?
I think that the most pressing problem for our district, and our district's a little bit different from the Senate district. The House district includes Hamakua area, goes into Hilo. It includes the Kamana portion of Hilo and goes around Mauna Kea. The district is about the size of Oahu with the population of Manoa, which is one family on Oahu. The difference between us and Oahu is that ours is also one of the 5 oldest districts in the state in terms of the age of our residents. So I think that that really changes for us what it is we can do in terms of the economics of it. For my part, I think that providing additional services for the Kapuna is one of the major issues that I have been dealing with. Transportation for them is a particular one that is of concern to me. And this past year, I was able to put in place a pilot program, bringing $800,000 to this district to begin a transportation program for Kapuna.
Thank you. Ms. Pac-Mander, most pressing issue, and what would you do at the state level?
Absolutely, it's the rising cost of living. Every day, people, friends, neighbors, I see them having to leave the island because they can no longer afford to live here. For several years, I've been studying how can we get single payer, Medicare for all, for the state of Hawaii. I believe that medical care is a basic human right, and what I learned in my research is that every year the state gets $2 billion for Medicaid, $2 billion. And if we were to have single payer, which would basically wipe out massive, like inconceivably massive amounts of administration work, we could, in terms of requirements that the insurance companies have lobbied to have doctors fill out for every single kind of medical device, plus different pharmaceuticals. Apparently, every insurance company has many tiers, and each tier requires a whole different set. If we wipe that out, that's already a savings of 30% to 97% of $2 billion. That can go right away to medical for all. If we can do that, then all those people in Hawaii that are just one accident or one hospital stay away from homelessness can be able to survive. This is such a basic thing that will straight off the bat solve our cost of living problem.
Thank you. Down to the table to Senator Inoue. Can you push the mic down? Thank you. And if you have questions from the audience, please make sure you write them down, and Hattie and Emma will come pick them up from you.
There are several issues that I've been apprised of in the district, and not only in the district, but throughout our island, and I'll mention it. Agriculture theft, affordable rental units, the high cost of utility. Let me go back to the agriculture theft. The penalties, as far as I'm concerned, with regards to the law, the penalties are very minuscule. I mean, you can go out and you can steal something from an area, whether it's a small item or large, but I'll tell you, having a penalty, a misdemeanor is unacceptable. So what will Lorraine do? When I get into office, I hope that we can increase the penalty and make sure that, that it's passed, as well as hopefully that it would kind of tell those guys out there that you are going to be penalized. Secondly, the affordable rental units. This year we've passed 500, and the governor, actually he signed the budget bill. So we provided $545 million for affordable rental units within the state. Now let me share with you, I wish the council was here as well, because with that monies, all the counties will be sharing with it. Now if Maui and Kauai and Oahu, because Mayor Caldwell is already doing it, he's creating mechanisms so that he can be able to provide affordable rental units provided in the places that are needed. Now what our county has to do is get their act together, start working on it, because we all know that infrastructure is the biggest use of that monies. And once it disappears from the neighbor islands, we'll never get there. High cost of utilities. And tell you, I'm so proud that there's many of you on this island and in my district that are on the grid or...
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
And as a reminder too, that the note that just came to me, we need to hold the mic about an inch from your mouth in order for people in the back to be able to hear. Now we're going to move on to some specific issue questions. And Representative Nakashima, you'll start with this round. The state of Hawaii has a goal of eliminating the use of fossil fuels and reaching 100% renewable energy by 2045. What steps does Hawaii Island need to take to plan for our future energy needs so they are in line with the state's goal?
Thank you very much. You know, until the recent lava flow, Hawaii Island led the state in terms of renewable energy, with Puna Geothermal providing 30% of the electricity on the island. With Puna Geothermal closed, you know, all of the electricity is back to being generated by fossil fuel generators, oil generators, by Helco, which is very unfortunate. I think that as we move forward, we need to look at reestablishing geothermal in a much better way than it has been at Puna Geothermal. I think that the technology at Puna Geothermal is a little antiquated and has led to problems. And we can do a better job if we had the right equipment for the high temperatures here in the islands. Secondly, I've also been a proponent of hydrogen fuel cells. And for our transportation needs, I see hydrogen as a good alternative to gasoline. With hydrogen, we can make it through electrolysis, through solar panels and what have you. And we can have fossil fuel-free motor vehicles as well using hydrogen fuel cells. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pathmander? Yep.
Whenever we talk about renewable energy, I feel like we are always asking the wrong question. We're always talking about renewable versus fossil fuels. I think the question that we need to ask is scale, industrial scale versus small scale. I'm a huge proponent of what I like to think of as the ahupua'a energy systems, where we actually are looking at bioregions and adjusting and designing energy systems appropriate to that, as if the native Hawaiians, when they lived there, were different kinds of energies to choose from, because then they would choose according to, is there a river there? Is there wind there? That's done at the corporate level, but it's done in a way that's so massive that the production and implementation is very destructive to the environment. And it's not as cheap as when you do very small scale microgrids, where it's basically free, because you're just it's just the maintenance of it. So I'm basically a huge proponent of decentralization of energy, make it small scale. You know, when you have these large scale wind farms and they send cables across the channel, there's a massive amount of energy that's lost right there. So that's raising up the price. When I lived in Korea, they had little villages along the rivers, the streams, and they would put an outboard motor and switch the motor switch so that actually it would create energy and it would be non-stop and there would be zero cost. The reason this isn't being pushed by the state is because the state is captured by corporate interests, and there's no way that corporations can make money on such schemes where the people have energy and they do not destroy the environment.
Thank you. Senator Noe, what steps does Hawaii Island need to take to plan for our future energy needs so they're in alignment with the state's goal of 100% renewable by 2045?
Thank you. My favorite subject. As Chair of Transportation and Energy, I'm one of the biggest proponents in the Senate with regards to energy self-sufficiency. And let me share with you, I'm so proud that the Hawaii Island, with regards to putting photovoltaic on the rooftops, has been and continues to be the highest percentage within our state. Let me also say that in order to enhance our photovoltaic systems, I also introduced a bill to give tax credits for energy battery storage. And this would actually help the utility companies also save those energy systems that does not go into the grid in case of emergencies, disasters, or what have you. That bill sailed through the Senate, sailed through the House to the last day, when negotiations on the last day, what the House decided to do was whittle it down. The bill would address tax credit for solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, and what ended up for utility scale and for residential as well. What we ended up with peanuts, only addressing residential, and that's not going to work to get us to 2045. Let's also say that Hawaii Island, without geothermal now, had provided 50% as we speak with regards to where we're at by 2045. By 2030, the state should have been at a point of 30%. However, let me share with you, and those that condemn HECO as well, but I'll tell you, they are moving. And you can tell from your bill statements where they are with regards to how we're moving to get to the 2045. Now, having said that, so what we're going to do then with the loss of geothermal? Hopefully, we don't get to the 80s when many of you who are here and were here, that we don't start getting blackouts, rolling blackouts.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Kimble, same question.
Thank you. So in addition to having the 2045 renewable energy goal, this year our state legislature also established a 2045 goal for carbon neutrality. I mentioned before that I was working as a geneticist for Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. More recently, I've transitioned in the last few years to systems ecology, and in particular have been working on a project looking at how to get Hawaii as a state to carbon neutrality. And a key part of that picture is, of course, the energy sector. Now, we have lots of options in terms of renewable energies. We have wind, we have solar, we have tidal, potential for geothermal if it's done correctly. And the question really becomes, one, how do we establish some of these technologies in a way that also promotes social and economic justice? You know, it's not going to, so far, you know, the adaptation and the implementation of solar has not been even across the board. So we need to look at ways that we do that in a socially just and economically just way. Another component of this is looking at how do we promote other benefits that are associated with renewable energy for our environment. And one of those, again, it goes to resilience. The more we have our energy systems distributed, the more we have our storage distributed, the more secure we are in the event of natural disasters and in the event of climate change. But when you go to energy meetings and you talk about policy, the elephant really in the room is our model for our utility, it's HECO. We have a model that is based on a thought from the 1930s about how you develop power plants. You develop them by getting investors to help you build power plants and transmission, and then they get a rate of return on investment. So one of the key things that we need to do for more renewable energy is to switch to a performance-based rate-making process. And I'll be happy to talk about that more later, because it's complicated.
Thank you. This next question also deals with the environment, and we're going to start with you, Ms. Packmander. Many people are concerned about the carbon emission issues related to Honua biofuel plant. What next steps do you propose to ensure that Honua will not become a polluter of air and water?
It's impossible. They've already said that they intend to inject 24 to 30 chemicals that are deemed hazardous by the EPA. I read the manufacturer's labels. One of them says do not very harmful to aquatic life, and they have acknowledged they're going to inject these in 400-foot deep injection wells that are only 80 feet from the cliff line and going to percolate out into the ocean as well as down into our aquifers. So I think it's a moot point. They say they've got all their permits and they're going full speed ahead. All that we can do now is lawsuits. The other issue is greenhouse gas emissions, 300,000 tons per year. And in terms of renewable, they say, well, we're renewable. Well, I just recently, a Yale School of Forestry study came out, and they don't know they're renewable because there have been no tests on that species of eucalyptus. But they did do studies on deciduous forests in the American Southeast, and they found that for these trees to be renewable, it would take 40 to 100 years before they could capture the same amount of carbon that was created and released when the tree was burned 40 years to a century prior. That to me is not renewable, that time lag. So I think all that we can do is protests and lawsuits. I don't think it's worth 30 jobs to irreparably destroy our aquifer and our coastal waters.
Thank you. Senator Inouye, what next steps do you propose to ensure Honua will not become a polluter of the air and water?
Well, let me say, according to the laws and the rules by EPA and State Department of Health, they can't pollute the air. Otherwise, they'll be shut down. There's no reason, and they got their permits. So if a company wants to do anything with creating renewable energy factories or what have you, there are laws and rules in place. And if they pass that, what can you do? However, let me say that initially, when the plant starts, I'll tell you, because they are the regulation rules that allow regulated air monitoring, no different than what they already do at the geothermal plant. Let me also share with you, when we talk about renewable energy, I support biofuels. And so if it can be done right, that's fine. As long as those companies are able to allow and receive their permitting process, then let the process decide. You did hear the alternatives that can be done. There are lawsuits with regards to the dairy. So if you feel I'm not going to, not as a senator, going to sue a company because of how I feel personally that is in compliance. If they're not in compliance, then I'll tell you the necessary mediation and the necessary penalties and whatever comes with it must be done, and it will be unacceptable. If there's polluted in the air done by any company, including Honua Ola, then they must be penalized as well, including if it gets out of position or out of the regulated amounts, then shut it down.
Thank you. Ms. Kimble.
Thank you. In regard to specifically Honua, where they are now is that they have their permits to operate. With the exception, they have the permit to construct the injection wells. They don't actually have the permit to operate them. And that right now is the only barrier between now and getting them operated. Generally speaking, again, mentioning that my work recently has focused on how to get to carbon neutrality. Globally, biofuels is really considered a boondoggle. I mean, there are very, very few rare circumstances where it actually results in a carbon neutral system. You have to be using degraded land where you're growing something like switchgrass. You have to have very specific combustion systems and capture systems, and we don't have that with Honua. So looking towards the future, what I think needs to happen is to prevent further projects that don't have this carbon neutral component in consideration. Like I said, we have this 2045 carbon neutral goal now, is that part of the guidelines regarding PUC, power purchase agreement approvals, is that it does have to consider carbon outputs and carbon neutrality. And so legislatively, that's something that I have worked on drafting legislation for and would continue to push for, is that is a component of PUC decision making.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima.
Yeah, I think as we go forward and we look at the needs for meeting the carbon neutral goals set by the legislature, it is important to look at new technologies that can be made available to us. That being said, Honua has made its permits. The permits would not have been granted if the dangers to the environment or the water supply were such as described. And as I checked in with the regulators and went through the process that they have gone through, I am convinced that they are doing due diligence to ensure that the permits that are being issued are in accordance with the laws that we have passed. With that being said, I think that the key, I think, is going forward and ensuring that all of the requirements are met, and the trees that were planted have not been there for more than about 20 years. All of those trees actually started in my dad's garage at the end of town. So, I kind of have inside knowledge that, those trees are not that old. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, and Senator Noe, you'll be the first to respond. We want to keep our district agricultural and to support small and local farming. What legislation would you propose so the small local farmer can effectively compete with large commercial agricultural operations?
Thank you. We have had bills, as well as those already had passed, to give and allow agriculture loans. With the Department of Agriculture, we provide, the legislature, provide loans every year to the tune of $5 million, and we'll continue to do that. Unfortunately, with what's happening with Puna and the demise of our papayas and the orchid farmers and those out there. Right now, it was presented to me that the loan program is down now to $3 million. So immediately upon returning to the capital, I think we need to increase the fee, the loan program as well. Secondly, we also have, and we'll look at probably establishing again the tax credits for organic growers. And so it's becoming more popular here in my district as well, and we'll continue to do that. I talked about the egg theft. That's a big problem. And so we'll continue to address that issue as well. However, I have, in my district of North Kohala, provided $1.5 million for new water resource, non-potable, that's ongoing now. And the report should be final by mid-next year. And this is to help those that are having either issues with the Kohala ditch or somehow just managing and go with the flow with regards to the weather. There's 30 million gallons a day that's going into the aquifer and that's just dripping from Waimea Mountains to the North Kohala region. The consultant already has identified sources to increase water resource.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Kimble.
Thank you. Being the scientist that I am, you can imagine that after going door to door and collecting specifically what each area is concerned about, I run some statistics. And for this area, the key concern was agriculture, and particularly sustainable agriculture, and particularly food security. And the key barriers for an agricultural future for us is the cost of land. And we have land that's been made available for lease, high quality land here on the Hamakua coast and up here in Honoka. And the challenge is that our farmers need to be able to live on the land that they work and cultivate. And if you're not able to live on the land that you work and cultivate, you're not able to protect your equipment, you're not able to have any investment where you're building up equity. And farming isn't certainly an uncertain employment. And we don't have many of our young folks today looking at farming and saying, hey, that's what I want to do. We've got a lot of people that love it and have a passion for it and want to take care of our community by providing food. But we don't have a lot of new young people coming into the profession. So we want to be able to make agriculture an option where you actually will be able to have a livelihood. Nobody's going to get rich off this, but just be able to take care of your family and do something that you love. The other issue is making sure that our local farmers can both create added value products and get their products to market in an easy way. I was talking to the Hamakua mushrooms guy from Mapohoihoi, and he was a mechanic in the Navy working on helicopters, and he said to me that the manual that he had for the helicopters was smaller than the regulations he had to go through in order to sell his mushrooms here locally. So we need to make it easier for our local farmers to get their products to market. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima. What legislation would you propose so the small local farmer can effectively compete with large commercial agricultural corporations?
Thank you very much. I think that one of the things that is most important for the local farmer is having the support and skill necessary to be successful as a farmer. For the past several years, there has been a program working out of Kamuela, which are wild farms, where the folks at wild farms have been mentoring other people who are interested in farming to come into farming and to do it on a part-time basis. They do it as a part-time. They have a system in place to minimize the daily work necessary to grow tomatoes. They have uniform greenhouses. They have a marketing plan for all of those tomatoes that are grown. And the individuals can keep their day job and do their farming on the side. And they do that until the point where they feel that they can make a go just doing farming, and they take the leap and do that. And I think that those are some of the key elements to having a successful farming enterprise. It's having the mentorship, having the skill, having the land, and having the necessary equipment and the market in order to be successful. We have a Go Farm program that is available here in Hamakua that helps people get into farming, learn more about the process, and hopefully eventually become farmers themselves.
Thank you. Ms. Pac-Mander.
I think the best way to help the small local farmer in Hawaii is to dismantle the edifice that is supporting large agribusiness. And I'm talking about the Agribusiness Development Corporation, which was formed in 1994 to help usher in Monsanto and all of the GMOs throughout our state. This still exists. It's a non-transparent office within the Department of Ag, and through them, cheap leases are given to industrial ag. And just for democratic purposes alone, I think that needs to be abolished, and we can start focusing on a vision for the small family farmer. I've been researching this for quite a long time, and what would work is not cosmetic fixes of a loan here or subsidizing here. What we need is a whole paradigm shift. We need a systems change. We need to see education working together with the Hawaii Islands Land Grant, Hawaii Islands Land Trust. I've talked to people there as to how we can preserve huge tracts of land in perpetuity for sustainable diversified farming by actually raising money and buying the land and putting restrictions on what kind of farming goes on. And anybody who buys that land at a lower rate, because it does have all these restrictions, will be required to farm sustainably and environmentally in an environmentally sound way. And we need to start a program modeled after the UH West Oahu agroecology program that actually pays students, most of whom have never had anybody go to college before in their family, to learn farm-to-table agriculture. They learn soil science, they learn how to plant starts, they learn how to do the books, they learn how to be a chef, they learn value added, they find the niche, and then together in this like multi-dimensional incubator program, they create an economy, and it works. And it's highly successful in Oahu. So we've got education, we've got land grant, land trust, and the third, abolish ADC,
And that's the end of your
and
time.
that's the end of my time.
This next question, Ms. Kimble will start with. It's harder for regular folks to own land and a house. What do you propose to mitigate the wide income disparity on our island?
Well, building more resilience in our community by making more affordable housing and diversifying our economy really focuses on making sure that we have the type of jobs here that allow our individuals, our community members, to be able to afford the housing. And, like I said before, we're mainly focused on tourism and real estate development as our primary economies. But I think that we are a ripe place for research in a number of different fields that would allow us to expand the skill set that we have here and expand the number of jobs that we have that would allow for a higher paying income, allowing people to afford more homes. We do also need to get a handle on the vacation rental situation. Of course, there's a lot going on with that right now in the county. The vacation rentals, the illegal vacation rentals, they're taking available housing out of the market. And there's really only two ways to bring down the cost of housing. You either increase supply or you reduce demand. And so in order to increase supply, we do need to get a handle on those illegal vacation rentals. And we also need to look at development in already urbanized areas. So increasing options for density so that we can have more people living in town with easy access to services. Other things that I support are a $15 minimum wage. Currently, you need to work 110 hours, so 2.5 full-time jobs, in order to be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in Hawaii. I do support a $15 minimum wage, and I also support paid family leave to allow our working mothers and fathers the opportunity to stay home and take care of their children and their family as they need and hang on to their housing.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima.
I would also agree that the economic diversity piece is key to changing the lifestyle in the islands. The tourism industry has been good to us. They're the largest employer. However, they generally tend to be minimum wage jobs, and often without benefits. And so, we have this employer that is kind of using our people. The profits are going out of state because none of the hotel chains are locally owned anymore. And it's just another way that we're exporting money out of state. In order to change that, we do have to diversify the economy. We have to create more locally owned industries and business. Because just having industries and business come in, which also then takes their profits and sends it somewhere else, that will not help our economy either. So we need to develop more local grown industries. We need to diversify the economy. We need to find ways to get better jobs and benefits for our people. And in that way, we can really start to change how people's quality of life are.
Thank you. Ms. Packmander, same question.
Okay, well, like I said, I do believe that having free medical for all will be an enormous step in keeping those people that are one brink away from homelessness from being out on the street. That is just huge. Tax fairness, yes. Rental tax. But in terms of economy diversification, I feel for this district, it's part Hilo and it's part ag. And as I said, I'd love to see a sustainable, diversified agricultural economy, which is a diverse number of different, all kinds of businesses that actually comes out of the UH system, which then takes me to the Hilo economy. I'd love to see a Hilo be the college town of the Pacific. I'd love to see private universities come here. I visited Cuba in the 90s to see how they became the only organic country in the world, and it was because of the embargo and they couldn't import pesticides, but what they did was quite ingenious, and at the same time they had a surplus of food. They had to give it to the cows, and they also had some of the highest level medical physicians in the world. The standard of study was awesome. It would be so great to have some world-class medical schools, law schools, and really a thriving economy in Hilo with bookstores and cafes, 24-hour bookstores. I mean, all different locally owned businesses. We could be an economy of the mind, and we can also be an economy of sustainable ag that nurtures and stewards our environment.
Thank you. Senator Inoue, what do you propose to help mitigate the wide disparity of income on our island?
I think we'll always have a disparity of income here, particularly on this island. And when you look at where the businesses are, you already can see there's a big difference where you have tourism on the west side of the island. And on this side of the island, pretty much small businesses are the ones that are thriving to provide an economic stability. We don't have large manufacturing companies to come here, and I don't think we'll agree that large manufacturing companies would survive or will assist us in our kind of living environment. This question as well should also go to the county, and I'm surprised that our county council people weren't invited to speak here as well. It has to be, when we look at what's available to our young folks, whether it's building affordable housing that they can purchase, or whether it's affordable rentals. We always look at location, location, location. How they apply zoning regulations. Or if they're going to approve another large development, make sure that developer provides housing units within a certain area and make it affordable. Look at what we did back in the 80s and the 70s when the hotels started building in the resort area. We made sure at that time as council members that they provide affordable rental housing, and we did that in the location up at the Waikoloa Village area. Having said that, I talked about the affordable rental program that we're looking at. Nonetheless, we're also coming next session looking at how we can provide housing that our young folks or those that could least afford building an income that would prevent them. There we go with the stop sign.
Thank you, Senator. But thank you all. You're doing a great job, and we're moving through a lot of questions, so appreciate that. This next one will start with you, Representative Nakashima. Please give us your input concerning the TAT tax, its uses and distribution.
The TAT tax uses and distribution. The TAT tax started a number of years ago at 5%, which all went to the state coffers. Over the years, the legislature has taken steps to increase the allocation of state taxes, and I think when the convention center was created, the tax was increased. Most recently, this last year, when the rail issue came up, the question of the TAT use was put forward, and we increased the TAT once again to help subsidize the Honolulu rapid transit. That being said, the reason that I voted for going with the TAT tax is, really when only if you stay in a hotel room do you pay the TAT tax. So only if you're staying in a hotel room do you contribute to the rail fund. However, under the GET taxes, you all pay for the rail as part of your daily lives. So, when you buy gasoline, you use electricity, all of that goes through Honolulu is touched by the rail tax. And so, in my mind, the only way to prevent the neighbor islanders from directly paying for that tax was to go with the TAT.
Thank you. Ms. Packmander, give us your input concerning the TAT, its uses and distribution.
In the bill this last legislative session, it was written that if we went with the neighbor islands giving our TAT tax, which is approximately $25 million a year, whether or not you stay in the hotels or not. Those are the people that stay in the hotels, and that's how much money that we're out now. This bill also specifies that it allows the neighbor islands to raise the GET, as if that is any consolation. I'm just really disappointed. I was speaking to Nancy Cook-Lauer about it further because she's been reporting on this since the very beginning, and she informed me that that tax was originally intended to rise and fall across the whole archipelago according to hotel usage. It was never intended to be specifically set apart for one island. And if I am elected, I will work to legislate that we get our TAT back and that it does rise and fall.
Thank you. Senator Inouye, your input concerning TAT, its uses and distribution.
Sure. Let me say that the TAT was created to pay for the convention center, period. and that was years ago. But we've already paid for it already. So hence the TAT continues. Let me say that I can be very tough. And let me tell you what happened last year with regards to the counties paying for the rail. If some of you remember and you read the papers, I was the first neighbor island person to say I will not support any increase in the TAT, nor that the neighbor islanders to be responsible for paying for the rail. I was a chief negotiator in the Senate for that bill. I was the chair of transportation. I've had the rail bill up until several years ago when I worked with the Lincoln administration, when we started looking at rail and the TAT. Let me share with you. During the negotiations, there were several options that we could do about increasing and paying for rail. There were several options, and I like the other option that Mayor Caldwell wanted, to extend it to perpetuity so that they pay for it on the 5%, increased by 1%. When, during the negotiations between closed doors, between myself, our chair of the Money Committee and the House, when I was presented the final bill that it said the neighbor islands will pay for it, I gave two options to the House Speaker. He denied. So I told my president who was there, Mr. President, I'm going to resign as chair of this committee because I want nothing to do with even teasing anyone, because I know it's already in the cards that they will pass this bill so that the neighbor islands will continue to pay for it. So absent that, I continued to fight the battle, and I didn't participate in it because I felt that it was just unacceptable that neighbor islands. However, we did raise part of the bill from $9.25 to $10.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Kimble, your input on the TAT.
Yeah, I will be succinct about this one. I think the TAT needs to be used to handle the impacts of tourism, and certainly the counties bear the brunt of that in terms of lifeguard, police force, emergency services. And there was a task force that looked at TAT in 2015, 2016. The TAT, the proportion that came to the counties was reduced during the recession, and a greater portion of it went to Oahu and to the state coffers. And the task force actually recommended returning to the previous pre-recession percentages. And if we did that, our county would get 25 to 30 million of the TAT income. And that's basically what I support. That's what the task force recommended. That's what I support. There was a bill moving through the legislature to do that last year. It failed in the Senate and conference. And if elected, that's something that I'm going to work for our county. Aloha.
Thank you. Very succinct. Next question, we'll start with you, Ms. Packmander. What is the one concrete step you would take to fight climate change at the local level?
I think it would have to be education, because when I talk to people of all ages, they really don't have a clue what's going on our planet. There's no idea of the resiliency that's needed to get into play with civil defense right now. Everything's scattered. We saw the chaos with the missile crisis. And it would be education at every level in terms of rising waters, these crazy storms, hardening, people now, developers still want to do hardening of coastlines, which is destroying reefs in order to stave off the rising tides. And then there's the lava, which I do believe that all of the fissures opening up in Yellowstone and the Galapagos, I feel like up till now geological time has been very, very slow, and suddenly it's catching up, and policy is going to have a hard time keeping up. So in terms of climate change, I would say education, it's very holistic of the whole thing, and as well as what exactly is renewable. That needs to be defined, because I do not think that burning biomass, which actually spews more greenhouse gas emissions than coal, is renewable, and it's been a twisting of definitions and semantics.
Thank you. Senator Inouye, what is one concrete step you would take to fight climate change on the local level?
Thank you. I think it's not to fight the climate change, but how we're going to manage climate change as it approaches us. I'm the only neighbor island legislator that sits in the new Climate Change Commission appointed by Governor Ige after the legislature appropriated funding for this Climate Change Commission. And I'm glad to sit on it. And I'm glad that we invite the neighbor island planning, the counties as well to sit on it. And we know by 2030 that sea level rise is going to be at 3.2 feet into our ocean environment as well. So the sea level rise by 2030 is the benchmark that we're working on as far as the commission is concerned, and what we're going to do about that, because that's the first thing that's going to be impacted, sea level rise. What do we do about it? And let me say, when I did say I'm glad the counties are involved with it as well, because they approve zonings and buildings throughout the state and throughout the islands. But for us, I think the concern that I have that we should all be concerned about, and we're not as bad a situation as it is at Waikiki, because you've read about it, you've heard that the most impact will be at Waikiki. The impact for us here, and I can tell you that because I traveled to Kona recently, and you look at the homes that are on Ali'i Drive, and it's been an issue years and years ago when those decided they're going to keep their homes there. You can see the erosion, and yet they always ask county, can you help us? What can we do when the building is owned by personal for their own residents? So that's a concern. How we manage it, and the commission had just 2 meetings, and we're supposed to be mandated. There goes the stop sign again, but if any of you are interested, I'll be around and you can catch me.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Kimble, one concrete step at the local level.
So I'm a Northwest Climate Science Center fellow. I was also invited to go to Washington, D.C. to participate with the American Meteorological Society on a policy forum. And the issue is that we are in a positive feedback loop with respect to carbon. And that positive sounds like a good thing, but in this case it's actually not. The rate at which carbon goes up, the more it goes into the atmosphere, it triggers other things that actually cause that cycle to turn a little faster, like releasing methane from the polar ice caps. So we are looking at a situation where we'll try to mitigate where we can, but what we really need to focus on now is adaptation. And as I said before, there's many different ways to do this. And in fact, with current technologies, there are ways to adapt that are good for us economically, they're good for our environment, and they're good for our communities. So we need to be very careful about planning in terms of how we adapt and adjust for climate change, so that we're doing it in a way that is fair, that is economically and socially just. So what I would say is one concrete thing that we can do here is, like I said, Hawaii Island in particular is a prime place for research, and particularly research with respect to climate change. Because of our topography, we have a natural temperature gradient, so we can look at how things behave as temperature changes. And we also have a natural rainfall gradient. And one of the effects of climate change is that our drought and storm cycles are going to change. And so providing this research environment that we have right here to the rest of the world is something concrete that we can do now to help ourselves and other communities adapt to the impacts of climate change.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima, the one concrete step you would take.
Yeah, this past year, one of the some of the most controversial bills that came before us was the lease of submerged lands. And you might wonder, why would anybody want to lease submerged lands? The reason for that is because their houses are falling into the water and they need to build seawalls to keep it from washing away. And I think that's just indicative of the planning that we have to brace for going forward, that the oceanfront properties are no longer going to be the most attractive properties to have. Up here in Kalapao, where we sit, several feet above the ocean, we might be the beachfront property of the future. And so, I think that the one thing, as I have one more minute left, is the one concrete thing we might do is maybe stop these political discussions, because all of this hot air can't be good for the climate environment.
Thank you. This next question we'll start with Senator Inouye. What measures do you propose to help make Hawaii Island as self-sufficient as possible?
Thank you. Good question. Agriculture. Let me say what we're doing with agriculture sustainability. And I'd like to follow our governor when he proclaimed a couple of years ago in one of his addresses to the legislature that he support, and we should be, the breadbasket of our own state instead of all the importing of goods, food that we import, which is close to 90% of the food that's provided for all of us. Going back, let me also share with you what I've been doing in my district, and I'd like to do this with the Hamakua Coast as well. I did mention to you about the $1.5 million water study we're doing for Kohala, and this is what I believe. Because of the loss, we're going to be losing some farmers in Waimea. You already see the signs of non-production of an agriculture parcel as you drive into the district. It's going to be turned into housing. So what I'm creating is a model used by the Whitmore project that's in Kunia on Oahu, that the good Senator Donovan Dela Cruz has created for his district. And I'm going to follow that model so that we are able to adapt and make sure that we have secured water for agriculture, as well as purchasing additional lands so we can make it available on an affordable price for our farmers as well, and looking at another purchase of land, which in my vision is to create a carbon-free and growing local foods, trees, that would adapt to a region near an area already has been cited in order for us to combat our carbon sequestration as well. And so I'd like to do that. The reason we need to do with Hamakua is for water infrastructure.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Kimble.
Thank you. In order to make our community, our island, self-sufficient, I think the key is making sure, again, that we have locally a broad range of skills. Sorry, the feedback coming through. A broad range of skills in our workforce. Again, that comes from diversifying our economy, and it also comes from supporting fully our public education system. One of the things that I fully support is the constitutional amendment, which would allow the property taxes on investment properties, this is second homes over $1 million, to go towards funding public education. And I certainly don't see education as workforce, exclusively for workforce development, but what I do see is that in these changing times, with technology changing so fast, we really do need to reinvest in career and technical training as an option for success, for a pathway to success for our students. So that's one component. Energy is another big issue. Again, we're importing a large amount of our energy is coming from fossil fuels. If that barge stops coming, we have 10 days worth of fuel in order to produce energy. So more locally generated renewable energy and storage is key to that. Third, protecting what we have, making sure that we protect our air and water resources so that in the situation we need to rely exclusively on ourselves, those resources are still clean and usable. Again, agriculture is certainly key. If you look, though, at the grocery store, and you look at the whole thing, really the only areas that we can affect locally are the two ends, the meat and dairy aisle and the produce aisle. And so, we're never going to manufacture greens here. We're never going to make Kellogg Frosted Flakes. We're never going to make wheat thins. So we need to, if we're going to develop food sustainability, it's retraining ourselves to focus on the food that we can grow here. And the Farm to School program is a key component of retraining those appetites so we have a more food sustainability.
Thank you, Ms. Kimble. Representative Nakashima.
Going forward, I think that one of the things towards sustainability is having the people trained to be sustainable. We often talked about food sustainability, but as I looked around, I didn't see us making any new farmers out there. Many of the programs for agriculture in the schools had gone by the wayside. We were emphasizing testing and math and reading, and we were leaving all of those other skills behind. Seeing that, one of the things that I wanted to put in place is to reconnect our students to many of the technical arts. So I created programs to provide enrichment in the CTE courses, that's the career technical education courses, such as agriculture, such as healthcare, and etc., that would allow them to pursue and become interested in those areas. When we started this program about 5 years ago, there were only 5 Future Farmer of America programs left in Hawaii, and now there are 15 schools that have the Future Farmer program. We've increased the number of participants 300%, and with that, we've also provided additional experiential programs throughout the summer that allows internships into farming and getting people back into the land.
Thank you. Ms. Pack-Mander.
Thank you.
Proposed to help us.
I worked for 5 years at an economics think tank called the International Forum on Globalization, where we studied the impacts of the global economy on small communities, like Hamakua is like a textbook case. And I met many thinkers and doers, and one of them was the one who developed the model program I'd like to fashion our Hilo program after at UH West Oahu. He started out 6 years ago with 24 acres. It's Ma'o Farms. If you ever go to any fancy restaurants in Honolulu, you'll see on the menus, Ma'o Farms greens. And he was so successful with the program of having kids do this integrated incubator economy, farm-to-table economy, that he was able to get the funding from the state as well as many places throughout the world to the tune of $1 million, where he's now got 200 acres and a full array of solar panels that powers the entire campus. So this is a model right here in Hawaii that we can follow, and what he's done is he's produced class after class of diversified farmers that do all different at the vertically and horizontally integrated aspects of a diversified agricultural economy. That's one thing. I lived in Kauai for 20 years, and I was on solar off the grid the entire time, and it was a piece of cake if you're educated and you know how to do it and you know that you're actually using energy and what that means. And we could definitely institute energy education from kindergarten all the way through 12. I think that's absolutely necessary to being a resilient society in this coming age of adapting to climate change. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Kimble, we'll start with you this next question. Getting the health care we need is a problem on this island. Many depend on Hamakua Kohala Health Center for primary care, and those facilities are both old and too small. The process to actually receive approved grant and aid funds can often take several years. What will you do to improve the system so approved funds are received in a timely manner?
So certainly healthcare costs and accessibility to healthcare is one of the key issues that has been brought up as I've been going door to door. I know from my own personal experience that, my husband, who's back here somewhere, he's been trying for 5 years now to find a primary care physician, and they keep leaving and they keep retiring, and we're not replacing them with our own locally grown doctors. So just talking about healthcare, one of the key issues is making sure that we have, we're supporting our own local kids who've been born and raised here, who know what it's like to live in Hawaii, to join a medical program and then ultimately practice here. And I would support a program that would provide grants for their medical training if in return they spent a certain number of years here providing Medicare and Medicaid services. In terms of greater grant and aid funding for our medical services and all the different issues that we need, one of my core concerns is that how inefficient we are with money in this state. We are 8th in the country in terms of the revenue that we collect per person, but we're 51st. They're counting the District of Columbia in terms of return on investment in what we get in infrastructure and government services. Now, the old adage is that government is inefficient, but that's really inefficient. And that tells me that there's a lot of holes in the purse. And so in order to get more funding, we need to close those holes and make more of that revenue available for the things that we need instead of being wasted.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima, what would you do to improve the system so approved grant and aid funds are actually received in a timely manner?
Every year, the grant and aid process is kind of it's a difficult process to get through. But the grantees, those asking for grants, come to us, and often we are able to meet the needs, especially the priority needs, such as Hamakua Health Center, and get the funding into the budget for their requests. Unfortunately, the process does not stop there, and there needs to be follow-up to us as the legislators, as the requests are being made, as the request for release is being approved. It's important to keep the legislators involved, because that is the only way that we can follow the process, call the people that need to be called, and ensure that the requests are not falling by the wayside or left on the table. Other things that we have done with regard to healthcare is that, for the last several years, we've had a residency program here, the Hawaii Family Residency Program, which has now graduated a total of 5 residents, 4 of which who are practicing here on this island. There are 14 new residents now, and we've opened a new facility for them at Hilo Medical Center. They are going into rural healthcare, and they are coming out to the various clinics to get experience in treating the people of the entire island.
Thank you. Ms. Peckmander.
Well, the lag is indicative of rural communities, which is why we're not able to retain doctors. The average doctor in Hawaii has to spend $40,000 a year just on administrative paperwork, which would be eliminated through single payer. It's just a question of political will. What we're fighting, people, are the insurance companies and the medical device manufacturers. And if we, as a people, can write and call to our legislators and say, we want Medicare for all, it will happen, because we all want to stay in office, right? And Right now, the voices of the people are not heard. It's the insurance company lobbyists and it's the medical device manufacturers. If we just eliminate that, we will sew up a gigantic hole in the purse that Heather's talking about, where our tax money is not coming back to us. Single payer will enable a whole lot of it to come back to us so that not only will we get the medical care we need, but we will retain doctors who want to be in Hawaii, but they always end up leaving because they won't have to pay that $40,000 a year in administration fees.
Thank you. Senator Noe, what will you do to improve the system so that grant and aid funds that have been approved by the legislature are released in a timely manner?
Thank you, and I think this question is more prevalent for Hamakua Health Center, that I've been trying to help to make sure that the monies are released, and there's probably a technical thing with regards to this particular year, which is rather unusual. However, let me also share with you, and we can thank the legislature for this as well, creating community health centers. We've never had this before, and Hamakua Health Center was one of the first. Luckily, as I'd like to add to Representative Nakashima, with regards to the Hilo Medical Center, we've dedicated a couple of days ago that it includes also those doctors on the residency internship program that will be managing that program as well. We're going to be dedicating the Waikoloa Village Clinic, the Waikoloa Village Health Center next week Friday with regards to the dental care. There's already a center there. Hawaii Island, we should be thankful, because let me say this, the state pays for health, the state pays for hospitals, the state pays for education. Nowhere in the country are states managing schools and paying for education. We pay for the Micronesians' health care. You remember the Medicaid program? It's an unfunded Medicaid program that was designed by Congress years and years ago, that Hawaii must pay for the Micronesians as they embark on Hawaii state. We don't have any assistance from the federal government to provide monies and their health care for all the Micronesians from all the islands that they decide to come to Hawaii. And that's the kind of questions you have to ask our congressional delegation. Why the lag for umpteen years that this state does not have a continued funding for the program?
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with you, Representative Nakashima. At the state level, what can be practically done to help small businesses thrive in Hamakua?
For the past several years, I had been chair of business and economic development in the state legislature, not in the state house. And as chair of economic development, one of the things that were of large concern to me was the fact that we weren't doing enough to provide for the ease of businesses to be created, to be able to, from the time that they wanted to open the business to the time they could open the business, that was much too long a period. And one of the things that I think need to be done is to streamline those processes so that a business person who wanted to create a business can do so much more easily and not have to wait for the bureaucracy to catch up with them.
Thank you.
Well, I feel, getting back again, that Hamakua, as opposed to Hilo, were two different kinds of economies. Hamakua is going to be your diversified ag economy, and I think I've gone through what I believe will do that, and that is a tried and true method that UH West Oahu is using. That actually pays students, and it's more than just to grow a farmer, it's more than just ag programs in the school. Students who would normally not go to college are getting degrees, and they're actually getting paid to do that. So this is like a huge sort of revolutionary concept. In terms of the Hilo economy, I would proactively seek out private universities from the United States, Europe, and Asia to set up a campus here. I know that New York University has campuses all over the world now. It's kind of a thing now to franchise out. And this is a way that once you have like that hub campus, businesses will naturally thrive and prosper. And like I say, it can be an economy of the mind that will attract thinkers from all over the world. So we can really get world-class ideas, but at the same time, I am very committed to retaining our culture and our lifestyle. And what is Hawaii and what is Hamakua? Thanks. Also, I just have to say, I've just been so touched and moved living here and learning from the people here. And that is something I would never want to threaten.
Thank you. Senator Noe, at the state level, what can be done to help small businesses thrive in Hamakua?
Well, let me tell you, if we increase the minimum wage to $15, you're not going to see a thriving small business in this community. And let me share with you what we've heard, and that's why you haven't seen any legislation to do that this year. The numbers of mom and pop stores, the number of businesses that have come to us, this will close our businesses. That's one thing we don't want to do immediately. I agree that over time that we can take care and address minimum wage. We just increased the minimum wage to $10. So let's take it in stride. Let me also share with you that many things can assist communities like this one as well. And the same issue I'm also assisting in our little town of Hawi. I think if we want businesses to thrive, we need to help with the infrastructure needs. Public restrooms, good parking areas, good lightings, and nice roads. I chair transportation the committee as well. And I'll tell you, I mean, in some ways, I can help because this road, Mamani Street, is a state highway. I'm also working on putting sidewalks near the churches so that our people can use the sidewalks and not be scared of getting into the roadways, or to make their walking and their walking paths a little more pleasant. So as far as I'm concerned, I think working and making sure our stores thrive, you know, what we can do on the state certainly is to help where we can help. Let me share with you as well. And I tell you, I was here one Sunday, and I was glad that after taking my visitors over to Waipio Valley as well, that I was able to find a store that was opened on Sunday. It was the Tibetan store. I think I was able to purchase my granddaughter's birthday gift.
Thank you, Ms. Kimble. What can practically be done to help small businesses thrive in Hamakua?
Thank you. First, I just want to say I see a lot of people starting to doze off out there and getting a little sleepy. Thank you for being so hardcore to keep listening, keep participating in this conversation. My husband and I are both small business owners. I'm a very small business owner. I have one employee, that's me. He employs about 10 local families here, or local workers. And I'll tell you, you know, in our conversations and conversations with others in the business community, the key barriers to growing small business in Hawaii and on the Hamakua coast is one, energy costs. Two, making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to support our businesses, particularly broadband. So making sure that we have the permits in place as 5G is coming in to be able to install that and making that accessible as widely as possible. The third issue is workforce development. So again, we've talked about having more career and technical training options available for both our young people and for people that want to retrain. You know, the future is certainly uncertain with where things are going to go with technology. And the key thing is that as a community that we're flexible, that we're able to adapt and learn new things and learn new techniques easily. So making sure that we have options for workforce development. Fourth and lastly, I think the key thing is the bureaucracy and the regulatory process. I mentioned that a little bit earlier with the Hamakua mushrooms challenges, and we do need to streamline that process. I certainly think that we need to protect human health and safety and protect the environment, so I don't want to see any regulations dropped in that regard, but we do need to be more efficient with how we help businesses start and get going.
Thank you. Okay, we're nearing the end of the questions, both those in advance and those that have come this evening, so hang in there with us. Senator Inoue, you'll go first with this one. Hawaii is at the tip of the silver tsunami about to crash in on us. What will you do to move the development of affordable housing in our district for kupuna who cannot live at home, don't want to leave this area, and don't require expensive full-time care?
Good question, and I think it will come. Part of the $575 million I talked about affordable rentals, and you also are aware that we have senior housing programs over in Kohala, we have them in Hilo, we have them in Kau, where we can start doing a affordable rental senior housing that also has to do with the care. And so this is something that we've already made the decision as far as the legislature and the governor is concerned, how we're going to help communities, whether it's for the young or our kupuna. Now, let me refresh some of the memory of the old timers here. There was a development right out here on the Hilo side of Hale Ho'ola, similar to what you're asking for. For some reason, the community supported it, maybe not all, but never was able to get off the ground because of opposition. So having said that, back in the 80s, had we approved that particular project, it would have taken care of the critical care for our kupunas going forward. So having said that, there are monies available. Now all we need to do is make sure that those developers are working with our HFDC, which is the housing agency that is the nucleus for this distribution of funds. And there are developers already doing senior housing no different than what's happening in Hilo at Mohu'uli with the Hilo Adult Care Center. And that also comes from state funding as well. And so it'll come, and hopefully communities will accept development of that areas.
Ms. Kimble, what would you do to move forward affordable housing for kupuna?
So our island, Hawaii Island, is expected of all the islands to have the most growth in the coming decades. We're expected to grow at a rate of 2%, which means by in about 35 years, our population will double. And the majority of that, as you say, is our 65 and older population. The key, I think, here with affordable housing for our seniors, and we do certainly want our seniors to be able to, age in place in the communities where they grew up, surrounded by their friends and family. The state is not going to be able to do this alone. We're going to need to form partnerships with, the federal and the county level, and also with, other private organizations that are willing to help us develop this affordable housing. As I mentioned before, I think the key component of this is increasing density in already urbanized areas so that they're close to facilities and services. Transportation is easily accessible. And the other component of this is making sure that our local families can stay together. And so it's not just about providing affordable care for our seniors, it's also making sure that their children and grandchildren can be able to stay here so that they can have relationships and take care of each other. And so, we want to make sure that we're supporting all ages and keeping our families together, keeping our families close.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima.
I think Heather touches upon a kind of key component in terms of being able to age in place, and it's having family stay in the community as well. All too often we're seeing kupuna living alone, and their kids have moved away, and they're left to age in place by themselves. With that, it's been a long time vision of the community to have assisted living facilities just mauka of Haola, the long-term care facility. And that land is held by the Hawaii Housing Authority. And currently there are a number of developers that are interested in developing that and moving forward. Across the street from that, above the park, is private land that other developers have approached me to discuss the possibility of low affordable housing opportunities. This past year, the legislature did pass a $570 million bill that included, among other things, affordable housing opportunities. And so we are exploring that as well for future possibilities of development for affordable housing right here in town.
Even if we have affordable housing for seniors, it doesn't mean it's affordable. Even if we have affordable long-term care, it doesn't mean everybody can afford it. Only the very poor who qualify for Medicaid, or those who can afford $13,000 a month for assisted care, are going to be able to enjoy their golden years in comfort. We have a huge problem, and it's medical care. So, also, my mom, I grew up with a mother who was a social worker who specialized in elder care. Kupuna want to stay at home, even if they're alone. What we need is not more capital improvement projects, although, of course we do, but what's most needed is service providers. We need people who can come in and check on them, clean, do their chore services, take them to the store if they need to go. That's where we need to really focus if we really want to meet the needs of the kupuna. We should go and ask those kupuna, do you want to stay in your home or do you want to go live in assisted care living? Would you like to stay and have chore service providers? They're going to say they want to stay at home and have their chore service providers. But if we do need to build affordable care, let's do it in a way where people really can afford it across the board. And we need to do some serious paradigm shifts of how we take care of our community.
Thank you. We're going to go into the 10-second, one-word question. So be prepared. I'm going to ask a very specific question. You will have 10 seconds to answer, and it'll be a yes or a no, with no adjectives, adverbs, or additional statements. You may wrap into your closing statement any additional information you want to share. And then we're going to do two kind of general 1-minute democracy questions, and then we'll go into the closing statements. So we really are just about at the end, folks. Okay, so start with Ms. Kimble. Do you support the TMT project?
Yes.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima?
Yes.
Ms. Pac-Mander?
No.
Senator Inoue?
Yes.
All right, very good, thank you. Okay, these next two are 1 minute to respond, and they're really about improving our democracy. And we will start with Representative Nakashima here. Do you support a citizens' initiative process where through petitions, citizens can get referenda on the ballot, which must then be implemented by the legislature? And you have 1 minute.
I think that I would support a limited referendum that would allow citizens to provide referenda that the legislature would need to implement.
Thank you. Ms. Pac-Mander?
So this is a 1 minute answer?
Yes, it is.
Oh, I would absolutely support it.
Okay. Senator Inoue, do you support a citizens' initiative process where through petitions citizens can get referenda on the ballot, which must then be implemented by the legislature?
I've always supported initiatives, and yes, I do.
Thank you. Ms. Kimble?
Yes, I also support a citizens initiative process. However, I do think it should have appropriate safeguards. One, to make sure that no one's civil rights can be taken away through the referendum process. Two, that no budgetary obligations can be adjusted. And three, that there is full disclosure on who is supporting a particular amendment passing, or a referendum passing, and what the actual referendum would do, not fancy language that makes it confusing about the referendum process. I will say, and this is a conversation that I had recently that I hadn't considered before, is that we should not have to look to the referendum process in order for our legislators to develop legislation that enacts the will of the people. That is their job. That's what we pay them for, and we shouldn't give them a pass for that.
Thank you. This next question, also 1 minute response, and it's related to campaign finance reform. We'll start with Ms. Pac-Mander. Do you support campaign finance reform with public funds replacing large private donations?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't take any corporate money, and it can create a real imbalance, and the fact that now corporations can donate money without disclosing who they are, so we don't know where this money is coming from. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Senator Inoue, do you support campaign finance reform with public funds replacing large private donations?
Yes, and we already have a funding mechanism, so any candidate can apply for campaign funds throughout the state as well. But certainly support that.
Thank you. Ms. Kimble?
Let me just start by saying that I think that the Citizens United ruling has been one of the greatest threats to our democracy as a whole. And I think that is true at the national level, but it has certainly trickled down to races at the local level. I fully support reform in our campaign spending commission. Let me just say, the amount of money that's being spent on our campaign in particular is absurd. And, it has to be done, though. I mean, that's the process. And, I think that without the real availability of real public financing, and we do have a public financing one, but it's not enough to run a campaign, certainly not a campaign in District 4. Because we don't have more of a public financing option for campaign spending, we are being limited to the candidates that are available to us. I'm sure there are a lot of very qualified people out there that could run if there weren't such a financial barrier to running for office. It is a privilege, I will say that, to be able to take the time to run for office.
Thank you. And Representative Nakashima, you'll be the last to answer this question. Do you support campaign finance reform with public funds replacing large private donations?
Absolutely. I think that the current public financing, I think, is flawed because it assigns amounts based on what was spent in the previous election for that race. And really, if it's a Senate race, if it's a council race, if it's a House race, generally you are representing a set number of people, and you should have equal amounts of money to get your message out to those people and not have it depend on how much was spent in the previous election.
Thank you. And now we'll move to closing statements. So you're about 8.5 minutes away from being released. You'll have 2 minutes for your closing statement. You can wrap in anything that you wish, whatever message you want to leave with the audience. And we will start with Senator Inouye and come right straight down the table. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight. I welcome the opportunity to answer questions. But I'm not much for blowing my own horn. However, I'm proud to be a very hardworking senator committed to serving my constituents. I've always kept an open door and developed trusting relationships, both in the community and in the legislature. I'm also proud I have worked closely during the past 4 years with teachers, principals, and parents of the 11 public schools in my district, and then secured more than $40 million for all of the schools, including $3 million to Honoka High and Intermediate. That's meaningful. There's lots more, including helping pass the Death with Dignity, Our Care, Our Choice law. We banned the use of toxic pesticide, toxic sunscreens, and bump stocks. We committed to achieving 100% renewable energy resources for utilities by 2045. That's big, that's progressive. It's all about relationships, and there's more to do. I am determined to transform our state's airports to the benefit of our residents. We must secure our fair share of TAT, the new $500 million Affordable Rental Housing Fund, and also the new $15 million Homeless Fund. Also, I want to change the laws so that at least one member of the PUC must be a neighbor islander. I want to further expand alternative energy options to protect the environment and create new jobs. We must increase penalties for egg theft, and I promise to work with all of you to determine how best to protect the cultural and historic Vahipana of Waipio Valley. I'm also determined to ensure that all public school children are able to afford a nutritious breakfast and lunch daily. The fact that more than 8,000 public charter school kids are not provided breakfast and lunch daily is obscene. We must fix this.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Kimble, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here and sticking it out in this warm room and with all this information. I want to have you all take out a pen and paper. If there is more information you'd like about some of the things that we talked about tonight, my cell phone number is 808-333-1535, or you can reach me by email, heather@voteforkimble, all one word, .com. I'm happy to talk with anyone after, especially about that TMT question, which that's a hard one to put into one word. I wanted to use my time. This is our last forum. We've had, 5 forums, I think. This is our last forum. And I wanted to take this time up here tonight to actually say thank you to all of my volunteers. Running a campaign is a team effort, and I couldn't have done it without the 60 people that have really backed me up. First, I'd like to recognize my campaign manager, Jen, over here, who's done a fabulous job. I'd like to recognize my husband back there, who's done a great job taking care of our girls and making sure the dishes and the laundry are done and making sure that they usually get a healthy meal. And then, we have teachers on our team, we have doctors on our team, we have retirees, we have stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads, and you've given so much of your time to help out this campaign. We've braved the weather and dogs and Google Maps out there canvassing. We've been to over 4,000 houses, talked to thousands and thousands of voters in the district. It's been so rewarding and wonderful. You guys have helped me address by hand almost 10,000 pieces of mail, which was a Herculean task. And I'm just so grateful for all the support. And we're just all unified behind one thing, that we want to do whatever we can within our little sphere of influence to make the world a better place. And I want to thank you for joining my team to build a brighter future for Hawaii.
Thank you. Representative Nakashima, you have 2 minutes.
10 years ago, I ran for office, and back then my slogan was Big Island Roots, Country Values. And to this day, that holds true. My family goes back 4 generations here in Honoka. I'm a graduate of Honoka High School, and I even taught at Honoka High. I left for college, I came back. I worked for the DOE, I came back. I went as far as Washington, D.C. To work with USNS Park Matsunaga. And every time, my country roots brought me home. Now, I have the best job in the world, representing the people of the 1st District. I'd like to thank all of you for your time and patience this evening, for spending the night with us and listening to what we had to say. I do humbly ask for your support and your vote in the upcoming election. Mahalo.
Thank you. Ms. Pat Kuhan, you'll close us out.
It's wonderful to look in the audience and see so many faces I recognize. I'm running for this office because I know we share the same concerns and the same needs and the same worries for our future, for our economic future. Just yesterday, my bank teller, I saw her on the street and she was looking sad, and she told me she had to leave the island. She's my favorite teller. She had to leave the island because she couldn't afford to live here anymore. Last week, in fact, almost every week, it seems like I meet someone that loses a job because the public transportation is not reliable for someone who had an on-call job, or there was no child care. I feel like we're really falling short, and there's so much we can do, and there's so much waste in government. I feel, talking to the people, how the fact that we spend the 8th in terms of our taxes, but we're the 51st in terms of the services we get back. And I know, I've seen how that can be, we can sew that up. I'm just really happy you guys are all here, and I really want to work hard for our community. I've thought a lot about it. I've talked to farmers over the years. I've talked to small business owners. I've talked to doctors. I'm concerned about medical care. Thanks for coming, and I do hope you'll consider me when you cast your vote this election.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of the candidates. Michael will close us out.
Isn't this great? You got to understand what a feeling of accomplishment that we're able to pull this off. I tell you, this is the highlight of me being District 1, and we're going to do it again in 2 years, I promise. So anyway, I'd like to thank, starting out with Susan, who took care of these people excellently. No one got out of line, no fights. And of course, our candidates, Lorraine, Heather, Mark, and Kuhan. I love this stuff. This is like what I live for. So, on behalf of District 1, Hamakua Resistance, and Honoka Business Association, thank you for coming out. We tried to, all the questions that came in, we did our very best to try to, develop them and make them so we could, present them to our candidates. Some of them, however, those who's passed them in, it would say 2 is either Mark or Lorraine or something. And we dropped those out because as you saw our venue here, our forum was to ask the same question to every person. So I encourage you to, if you had specific questions for a specific candidate, please feel free to contact them directly. I think that's, that's the way to end that up. All right, with that, hey, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, we did her, Rob. This is it.